Hi and welcome to Power Play. I'm Mike Lecouteur in Ottawa on this Halloween Friday. Coming up, is this a turning point in Canada-China relations?
Very pleased with the outcome of the meeting. Our officials are instructed to work at pace on issues moving forward.
Prime Minister Mark Carney and Chinese President Xi Jinping met face to face. It was the first formal leader-to-leader meeting between the two countries in 8 years. How did it go? And what's the road ahead as trade tensions hang over this relationship? China's ambassador to Canada, Wang will be here, and I'll ask him that question. Then, the ongoing commercial kerfuffle.
What they did was wrong. He was very nice. He apologized for what they did with the commercial.
U.S. President Donald Trump said the Prime Minister has apologized for the Ontario tariff ad, but trade talks are still on hold. So what kind of challenges is Prime Minister Carney going to have to deal with when he returns from Asia? We'll break that down with our front bench. Today we have Sabrina Grover, Larissa Waller, and Carl Belanger. Plus, holding the balance of power and keeping his powder dry.
We want to see an investment budget, not an austerity one.
Opposition parties are weighing whether or not to support next week's federal budget. What's the NDP's red line? Interim leader Don Davies will be here in studio, coming right up. First, though.
Are you and Canada going to resume negotiations?
No, but I have a very good relationship. I like him a lot. But you know what they did was wrong. He was very nice. He apologized for what they did with the commercial. Because it was a false commercial. You know, it was the exact opposite. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. And they tried to make it look the other way. And he did apologize, and I appreciated it.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump there aboard Air Force One earlier today. Now, Trump says Prime Minister Mark Carney apologized to him for Ontario's anti-tariff ad. That commercial led the president to cutting off trade talks with Canada last week. Now, in spite of an apparent apology, Trump says negotiations are not going to resume. Just hours before that, Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC summit in South Korea. It's the first official meeting between our country's two leaders in 8 years. The tete-a-tete comes as Canada aims to recalibrate its relationship with China in the wake of trade tensions with the U.S. Here is how Carney described the conversation.
This meeting today is long overdue. It has been 8 years since a Canadian Prime Minister has met with the President of China. We now have a turning point in the relationship, a turning point that creates opportunities for Canadian families, for Canadian businesses, and Canadian workers, and also creates a path to address current issues. So very pleased with the outcome of the meeting. Our officials are instructed to work at pace on issues moving forward.
With more on how that meeting went, we're joined by CTV's Judy Trin, who is traveling with the Prime Minister in Asia this week. Judy?
Mike, the meeting was hosted by China. President Xi Jinping spoke first in Mandarin, and the language the two leaders used mirrored each other. Looking directly at Xi, Carney expressed regret for lost time.
Distance is not the way to solve problems, not the way to serve our people with people-centric growth, as you have advocated. Pragmatic and constructive engagement is.
The meeting lasted 39 minutes, and according to a readout from the Prime Minister's office, the leaders discussed trade issues and irritants, including agriculture, canola, seafood, and electric vehicles. In his remarks, Xi congratulated Carney for becoming Prime Minister and noted that China-Canada relations have achieved a recovery and momentum towards positive development. Xi also invited Carney for a state visit, which the Prime Minister has accepted. In a scrum with reporters after the meeting, the Prime Minister said that Canada was at a turning point in its relationship with China, a turning point that would create new opportunities for families, businesses, and workers. The 8 years that went by without any official contact was in large part due to the fallout from Canada's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou at the request of the U.S. and China's detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. While there were discussions about trade irritants, the official readout did not mention any concerns about China's record on human rights or foreign interference. Mike.
CTV's Judy Trin reporting from South Korea. So, how did China feel that meeting went? Well, I spoke with China's ambassador to Canada earlier today. Ambassador D, welcome back to Power Play. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me with you.
Many Canadians were watching that meeting between Prime Minister Carney and President Xi today, wondering if there was an agreement that did come out of this. So I want to know, following the meeting, is China any closer to removing those tariffs on Canadian canola and other products?
The meeting was very important and very successful. Provide a very important opportunity for bringing bilateral relations between our two countries back on the right track of sound and stable and sustainable development and delivering more benefits for the peoples. So during their meeting, our president and Prime Minister Macron reached very important consensus. Both sides agreed we will work together to resume or restart exchanges and cooperations in various fields, move forward in solving the specific economic and trade issues of each other's concern, consolidate the momentum in turnaround of their relations, and jointly advance the China-Canada strategic partnership. So China is ready to work with Canada to implement the important consensus reached by two leaders, and we work together to lift our strategic partnership to a more higher level, which will provide real benefit for our two peoples. Thank you.
So when you say that you're ready to work with the Canadian government, that your government is ready to work with the Canadian government, does that work include on removing tariffs on both sides?
Tariff issue is not, I think it does not represent the whole relation between China and Canada. So just as I mentioned during their meetings, they're talking about how to promote our strategic partnership and how to expand our practical cooperation in various areas and how to move forward in solving each other's concern about tariffs issues and other issues. So I think with good and very clear political wills and with very strong and solid determination, both sides will find an appropriate solution to stress the issues between both sides.
I can appreciate how you're saying that those tariffs are not everything that encompasses that relationship between Canada and China. But for a lot of Canadians, that is the main roadblock to continuing those conversations and to moving forward, as you has put it as well. Was there any indication from the Canadian government that they conveyed to the Chinese side that they intend to lift any kind of tariffs on Chinese products like those Chinese EVs that currently have that 100% tariff?
Just as mentioned, the tariffs issues is part of the issues that we discussed between two sides. So I think, first of all, both sides recently talked about how to lift our strategic partnership to a more higher level. So that will be a wider framework for both sides to discuss many issues, how to increase our trust and by several years of difficulties happened for our relations, and how to expand our practical cooperation in various areas, and how to strengthen people-to-people exchanges, which will provide very strong support for public opinions and to support our better relations. So there are a lot of homework should be done after the very important meeting between two leaders.
So how much of that homework is to look at a path towards both sides removing tariffs?
Both sides now is on very close exchanges and connection on these issues. So just as two leaders agreed, both sides will keep working very hard to finding a solution for these tariff issues.
So just to be clear, before I leave this subject, did both leaders agree that they would charge their sides and their colleagues within each government to have a path forward, to chart a path forward towards removing those tariffs? Was that one of the outcomes of this meeting?
Sure, I'm sure. I just heard Prime Minister Carney mention that two leaders will direct officials from both sides to continue discuss about tariff issues and other issues.
In a statement that came after the meeting, President Xi talked about how China-Canada relations have achieved a recovery and, quote, positive development momentum. Concretely, what do you want that momentum to build towards? Where do you see this relationship going?
As President Xi Jinping underscored in his meeting with Prime Minister Carney, China and Canada should develop an objective and rational perception of one another, view each other in the correct way, and advance the bilateral relations in light of common and the long-term interests of both countries. So I think this is very important. And also, China and Canada should uphold mutual benefit and expand practical cooperation in economy, trade, and energy, which is becoming a new growing point for trade relations. Also, two sides should increase people-to-people exchanges. And also, two sides share many common views for the international affairs. So, two sides should strengthen coordination and cooperation in the United Nations and the other multilateral frameworks, bring out a more just and equitable global governance system and uphold international fairness and justice.
In terms of the relationship moving forward, Prime Minister Carney has said that he is aiming, he told this to a business crowd at the summit, he wants to double non-U.S. exports out of Canada over the next decade. Would China like to double their imports from Canada?
I want to make it very clear. China, we have taken very open and positive approach to expand our economic and trade cooperation with Canada. Actually, China, Canada, we have many great complementarity in terms of resource endowments and economic structures. So during 55 years of our diplomatic ties, China, Canada, we achieved many fruitful outcomes in trade area. So if we look next 50 years, I think there are more and more opportunities we can seize to explore more cooperation in this area for our two countries.
But do you have an idea of how much more China would like to expand with Canada going forward? As a result of this meeting, maybe into next year or the year after, do you want to see an increase in Canadian imports into China?
Yeah, I think it depends on the market, on the products. Is very enough competitiveness or not? So, what I looking forward is not only double our trade if both sides have enough capabilities and have enough competitive products. Why we not make this trade triple than what we already have now?
I wanted to ask you one last question before I let you go. The day before the meeting that Prime Minister Carney had with President Xi. There was one between U.S. President Donald Trump with President Xi. It lasted twice as long as the meeting with Canada, and they came out of it with very specific results. Why were there not similar results out of the meeting between Canada and President Xi?
I just told you that the meeting between President Xi Jinping and the Prime Minister Macron was very successful and achieved many outcomes and reached many important consensus. So both sides now working very hard to implement these consensus. So I'm sure more and more good news on the way.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Chinese Ambassador to Canada, Wang Di, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, parties are playing games, or playing the blame game, on Parliament Hill, with the Liberals and Conservatives accusing each other of wanting a federal election. Now, it comes as parties ponder their support for next week's federal budget. What will it take for the NDP to get on board? That party's interim leader, Don Davies, joins me next on Power Play.
Our budget strategy to spend less so that Canadians can invest more will give investors confidence to build more in Canada.
We need to bring back the civil service to a sustainable level. We'll be very transparent with people, but we're going to be very compassionate in how we do it as well.
Walk down a few stairs, talk to his boss, tell the leader of the opposition, that Grinchy guy, don't steal Christmas from our kids, don't cause a Christmas election.
It's a question of negotiations, it's a question of making sure that we are reflecting priorities for different members of Parliament. We're doing that.
The Liberal pre-positioning has been at a fever pitch this week. A number of ministers talking about Tuesday's federal budget and the stakes of that vote. While talks are happening with the opposition, the government's line in the House of Commons has been pretty clear. The Liberals are framing this vote as a choice between their fiscal plan and an election. Now, that's the rhetoric. So what's the real talk? Well, Don Davies is the interim leader of the NDP. Don Davies, welcome back to Power Play. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be with you, Mike.
So we're just a couple of days away from the budget, much anticipated. For the people who are putting the finishing touches on that document right now, you've got an opportunity on this show, they're likely watching, to lay out exactly what it would take for the NDP to support it. So what would it take?
Well, to answer that question, Mike, I think it's helpful to describe the context as we see it. So right now, Canadians are really struggling across the country. Prices are sky high for groceries and rent. Unemployment is at its highest level in 10 years, particularly bad for young people. 1 in 6 young people, Mike, is out of work, and many more are underemployed. You have sluggish economic growth, and of course we face serious problems from south of the border. So in that context, with serious affordability problems and serious issues facing our economy, we want to see a budget that invests in Canada. We see this as an opportunity for us to develop our economy and put people to work, create good jobs, build affordable homes, strengthen healthcare, and get our economy moving again. So we want to see an investment budget, not an austerity one.
So what are the markers you're looking for then? Because if you're saying you want to see investment in housing, investment in healthcare, to what level? You must have an idea of what you want to see in that budget.
Well, it's always hard to talk about a budget that we haven't seen yet, But
you're talking about how you don't want this to be austerity, you want it to be investment.
Right.
So to what level? You must have a marker. I mean, if they come and say they just want millions of investment, that's likely not what you want.
Well, let's start with not cutting. So we have a healthcare system that I think is in crisis. People can't get a family doctor, people have long wait times, health workers are burning out. So the absolute worst thing that you could do that we would never accept is cuts to the healthcare system. So that's sustaining it. But we also want our healthcare system to be strengthened. So, the NDP brought in pharmacare and dental care. We want to see those programs supported. And we'd like to see sufficient funding that we can build a healthy system. We've said that a healthy economy needs a healthy workforce. So there's an example. In terms of investment, it's not just investing in nation-building infrastructure. It's making sure that those taxpayer dollars are creating good, family-sustaining, preferably unionized jobs across this country. We don't want to see that money go to foreign firms or for instance, have temporary foreign workers. Investing in our country with a $300 billion infrastructure deficit, there's no shortage of great projects we need in this country, whether it's high-speed rail between Windsor and Quebec, or mines with Indigenous partnerships in British Columbia, or the infrastructure cities need. We should be investing in our country right now. And that's why, Mr. Carney referring to an austerity budget or signaling to Canadians that he's going to cut jobs or cut services Canadians rely on, we think that's the absolute wrong way to go, and that won't cut it for us.
So given the scenario that you put forth as well, that Canadians are struggling and that Canadians are having a hard time paying the bills and getting services, is this then the right time for an election?
Well, we don't think so. I don't think Canadians...
So does that mean that you're going to vote for this budget? Because that's kind of the binary decision you have in front of you, is either you support the budget, no matter what they put in it, and whatever it is that you hope will solve all the problems that you laid out, or you go for an election at a time when possibly Canadians don't want one.
For 6 months, Mike, I've been saying Canadians elected a minority parliament. And that means that Mr. Carney has a minority. He needs to work with other parties to get anything passed, including a budget. It's his government. He holds the pen. And the question of whether there's an election or not is entirely up to Mr. Carney, because it's his job to craft a budget that can win the support of at least one other party.
But you can help him craft that budget by laying out even today and saying this has to be in there, and then I will support you. You have that opportunity. I mean, that was partially an opportunity that was in the supply and confidence agreement, but now it's even a greater opportunity because there is no contract that really ties you to the Liberals. So why aren't you being very clear to lay out to this government, this is what has to be in it, and then you'll have our support?
Well, you may recall that Mr. Carney very early on said that he would not seek any agreement with the New Democrats. It's up to the government to reach out to the other parties in order to ask us for what we want in the budget. They haven't done that. I mean, it's up to them to invite parties in. A month ago, you had Steve McKinnon, the Liberal House Leader, saying that they were just going to govern and put a budget out, and it's up to the opposition to vote how they want. So this is the approach they've chosen to take, is to almost govern like they have a majority and then double dare parties, opposition parties, to vote yes or no. I don't think that's the way that a minority parliament should work. We have been very clear, though, about things that we need to see in the budget. Has to create good jobs, has to create affordable housing, has to protect healthcare. And we've been specific, if you listen to us in the House. We think there should be a youth climate corps, put young people to work in communities across this country. Good for creating jobs, good for environmental resilience. We've talked about an east, west, north electricity grid so that we can actually bring clean energy to people. We've talked about co-op housing and how that's essential. So there's no shortage of specific proposals that the NDP has identified to the government that if they want to, they can put in the budget. So it's entirely up to them. We don't want an election right now. We'll see if Mr. Carney crafts a budget that can win the support of us or any other party.
Given all that, when the budget does have to go to a vote, is there a scenario where there are some NDP MPs who don't vote, are absentee for whatever reason?
Well, we're not going to speculate on any kind of electoral outcome. What I've said from the beginning is we're going to wait and see the budget. I think that's what a responsible opposition does. I'm a little bit disappointed at the Conservatives and Bloc, who seem to position themselves to vote no to a budget they haven't even read. So we're going to do what I think, I'm a Jack Layton New Democrat, Mike. I mean, we want to be propositional. We want to actually work to make Parliament effective for people. So we're going to read that budget carefully. We're going to consult stakeholders. We're going to talk to working people, and we will caucus together. And if this budget is good for working people, it might earn our support. And that's the lens we're going to use. Is this budget good for working people? Not just for the corporate sector or for the wealthy. I'll point out that Mr. Carney has given billions of dollars of tax cuts to the wealthiest Canadians in this country. He cut the capital gains inclusion matter. He withdrew the digital services tax on the biggest tech companies in the world. The Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musk.
It was a calculation in negotiations with the United States, they would say.
Chose to do it. Both of those measures took billions of dollars out of the government's coffers, and now they find themselves with a revenue problem. So if they end up cutting services Canadians rely upon, we think those are poor choices. you'll be hearing New Democrats loudly and clearly if that's what happens in the budget.
Just before I let you go, in that vein, we'd heard from François-Philippe Champagne, the finance minister, saying this week that public service must return to sustainable levels, and he used the term workforce adjustments. How much does that worry you?
It worries me a lot.
Are those the type of cuts that you're worried about and that would force you to not support a budget?
Well, absolutely, we're worried about it. I mean, if we want to create jobs for people and we have an unemployment problem, then cutting, good family-sustaining jobs that deliver services to Canadians. I mean, do Canadians want to wait an extra 3 months to get a phone call back from CRA? Do they want to wait 6 months to get a passport? Do seniors have to wait longer to get their OAS checks? I mean, there's ramifications and consequences to cutting services. So budgets are about choices. We're going to wait and see what kind of choices Mr. Carney makes. And New Democrats were sent here to fight for working families and make sure that they get relief from the terrible affordability crisis that they're facing. And that's the lens we're going to bring to this budget. But now's the time to create jobs, not cut them, in our view.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Interim NDP leader Don Davies, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
In other news, the Supreme Court has struck down mandatory minimum sentences for accessing or possessing child pornography. Justice Minister Sean Fraser's office responding to the ruling in a statement saying, in part, child abusers should face the toughest penalties Canadian law allows. It goes on to say, we are aware of the Supreme Court's decision and are reviewing its implications carefully. In the coming months, our government will introduce new measures from our campaign platform to better protect children from horrific crimes. Ontario Premier Doug Ford wants swifter action. In a social media post, Ford called on the feds to use the notwithstanding clause to reinstate the mandatory minimum sentences immediately. On the other end of a quick break, Trump says Carney has apologized for the Ontario Reagan ad that angered the president, but talks still aren't restarting. So where do we go from here? We'll ask our front bench. Sabrina Grover, Larissa Waller, and Carl Belanger are all standing by. One of them is a little excited for a certain game later on tonight, and maybe we'll talk about that as well. Stay with us.
Very pleased with the outcome of the meeting. Our officials are instructed to work at pace on issues moving forward.
Is it to China, Prime Minister? You alluded to an invitation.
An invitation has been extended, and I indicated that I look forward to accepting that invitation. Yes.
That was Prime Minister Mark Carney early this morning in South Korea following his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. It comes as the countries seek to normalize relations following years of tension. And with the U.S. tariffs still in place, Canada is looking to expand trade away from American markets. Now, on top of all of that, talks with the U.S. have stopped after Ontario's anti-tariff ad angered the president. Now, earlier today on Air Force One, Trump claimed that Carney has apologized for the ad.
Are you, like Canada, going to resume negotiations?
No, but I have a very good relationship. I like him a lot. But what they did was wrong. He was very nice. He apologized for what they did with the commercial. Because it was a false commercial. It was the exact opposite. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. And they tried to make it look the other way. And he did apologize, and I appreciated it.
Okay, so where does the Prime Minister go from here? Let's bring in our front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's now a senior advisor at North Star Public Affairs. Larissa Waller is the founder of Henley Strategies. She's the former head of communications for Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford. And former interim NDP National Director Carl Belanger is also with us. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. Sabrina, it sounds like we have some progress, or the Prime Minister can at least claim some progress, but can he come back from this trip telling Canadians it was a true success?
I mean, I think that there's been a lot of signals of positive movement, and I think trade deals and foreign policy happens incrementally. It doesn't happen all at once unless, a big thing or like something big happens. And so I think it can be demonstrated that this was successful. He opened up trade talks with several Asian nations at his conference. I think the meeting with Xi Jinping was historic and also really signifies not just to Asia, but really to the world that Canada's ready to play and ready to enter back into this global game. And I mean, already we have a good baseline of a relationship with Asia that just needs to be expanded upon, right? I mean, if you look at even TMX right now, we export 70% of TMX oil is going to China already. So there is that baseline to expand upon. We're not starting from scratch, even though it might feel like that based on where the relationship's been. And I think this was a successful trip for him.
Larissa, I'll ask you what I asked the Chinese ambassador to Canada, Wang Di. The fact that there was a meeting the previous day between President Xi and U.S. President Donald Trump. And of course, all of this is interconnected. And the fact that they actually came out of their meeting with more progress, with a little bit of progress at least, or removing of some of the tariffs. I mean, how do you think that Mark Carney gets to frame this when he comes back home to Canada?
He's going to call it a success, right? And honestly, having a meeting in and of itself can be viewed as successful, but having a meeting doesn't actually mean having influence. And we have to decide as a country, and then it's a hard moral decision, how much do we want to get in the sandbox with China, right? There's a lot of things that China does that aren't palatable to Canadians, to Canadian values. They have a really bad history of executing Muslims. They've got a bad history of how they play in Africa, and we see that massacre in the Sudan right now. They have a bad history on being on the wrong side of Russia and China, Russia and Ukraine. There's a lot of things that we'd have to hold our nose to if we want to get into a more deep economic relationship with China. But we can't afford to be that precious. And so we have to figure out how to balance all those things, right? And the big thing about this is we don't matter that much on the world stage anymore. Our economy isn't strong anymore. So we can have these bilateral meetings. We can try to open up access. But until our domestic economy improves, until we make real moves to encourage international investment, no one's going to care and it won't matter. It's just going to be photo ops.
And Carl, how does Carney do that in the current environment?
Well, I mean, he can take a victory lap and claim that he won. There's a lot of winning happening. But the reality is that unless you bring back jobs and unless you find a way to reduce the cost of living, Canadians will judge him on that. And that's the only thing that matters. So this is why these trips are problematic, because, you can have a lot of window dressing and meetings and follow-ups. But the reality is that it takes a while for anything to materialize. And we are in an emergency right now until we find a solution with the Americans, which, is not getting any closer. So that's the double whammy for Mark Carney. Now, he has some time ahead of him. But, there's a reason why there are rumors that the Liberals might win an election sooner rather than later. It's because right now he's still on the honeymoon. He's still surfing that wave. So if he can find a way to get his majority, he might seize that, as opposed to try to survive until the summer when more jobs are gone and none of the trade deals have materialized into anything concrete for Canadians.
Yeah, and as we've been saying, sort of the undercurrent in all of this is the fact that Canada is seeking to try and really move away, diversify away trade from the United States. And I want to sort of talk about that conversation and even that clip on Air Force One that Donald Trump saying that, hey, look, he apologized for the commercial. And the reason I want to bring it up is specifically because of this clip that we have of Doug Ford that came out today on social media. And he was really talking about Buy Ontario. Have a listen.
Chocolate inside. Well, you got me on this one. I got the other ones, but you know something? Once you tell me, I'm going to go.
Well, we had to stump you somewhere. It is Rio Thompson.
Rio Thompson, I'm coming to pay you a visit. This is great. This Halloween, make sure you try and buy Ontario made products like the ones in front of me.
Okay, I'm not going to say I just wanted an excuse to play that ad, because Doug Ford continues to be the guy that is championing Canada and saying that he needs to make sure that, he's Ontario candy this Halloween. But Larissa, as somebody who has worked with him, I wonder what the implications will be of Trump saying that Carney apologized to him for Doug Ford's ad, even though Doug Ford continues to stand by it. Do you think that there's going to be any damage control that Mark Carney's going to have to do? Or do you think he already had a conversation with Ford to talk about the framing of this coming out of it?
Of course, he had a conversation. The Prime Minister and the Premier talk all the time, right? And it's probably the Premier saying, hey, buddy, throw me under the bus, apologize for me, tell him you can't control me, right? And Mark Carney's probably saying, yeah, right? Like that's sincerely how that conversation would go. I'm laughing because, you know, the world where we are trying to bring in the Premier's Halloween video into the discussion around tariffs and our negotiation with the United States is a bit of a stretch. The Premier is wildly popular on social media. He's very good at making these videos. His social media team is extraordinary. And the point of the video was to highlight Ontario products, which is not the first time he's done this. He started this supporting Ontario businesses during COVID, right, with the Made in Ontario stickers. Yeah. It's grown, obviously, during this kind of era of trade negotiations. I think we would be careful to draw the Halloween chocolate video into the discussion with Trump and tariffs. If that's where we want to go, that's okay. But the Premier will always champion Ontario-made products, and he loves chocolate.
I just wanted to bring it up, Larissa. I mean, it's too good of a commercial to leave out of this show. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I'm not saying you're new to Fridays, but it's kind of our thing to just go a little bit. Look, you brought the Jays stuff. I had to go out of left field, so that's all there is to it.
He loves
sadly,
chocolate.
I'm not going to have.
Loves it.
Yeah, I'm not going to have time to let the other two jump in on this because we're going heavy. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but they will be back on that pre-budget political positioning that's happening on Parliament Hill. Stay with us.
Our message tonight is exactly the opposite of what youth heard in that somber, dystopic speech from Mark Carney. Our message is, you don't have to live like this. You deserve better. Canada's youth are the best and the brightest in the world.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre last night at a rally in Toronto telling the young audience that they have, quote, sacrificed enough. The speech was the Conservatives' answer to the Prime Minister's primetime pre-budget address to university students last week. Now, in that speech, Mark Carney spoke about the need for sacrifices. While all of that is happening, the Liberals and Tories are accusing each other of wanting a Christmas election. The Carney government still needs 3 votes to pass the budget and avoid that scenario. What will it take to get the support from the NDP? Well, I asked interim NDP leader Don Davies just a little earlier on in the show.
With serious affordability problems and serious issues facing our economy, we want to see a budget that invests in Canada. We see this as an opportunity for us to develop our economy and put people to work, create good jobs, build affordable homes, strengthen healthcare, and get our economy moving again. So we want to see an investment budget, not an austerity one.
Okay, so what's at stake politically for all these parties? Let's bring back our front bench. Sabrina Grover, Larissa Waller, and Carl Belanger. Carl, I'll start with you, especially on Don Davies there, and really being non-committal about what he wants in the budget, saying what he doesn't want, but clearly every one of these parties now, is looking at this and has a calculation to make as to whether or not they want people to sit down and whether or not they want an election.
Well, I don't think anybody, really wants an election, but I think the parties are prepared to have an election, and they're prepared to do it if they don't get some kind of a win. And when it comes to the budget, I think it was an interesting play by the NDP to not do the traditional shopping list ahead of the budget and say, well, here are the principles we're working on. Here are the things we'd like to see generally. And then when the budget comes down, they will have an opportunity to go and make specific, requests for changes. And that's when we'll see if the Liberals are interested in playing with that with that game, if they're interested in making changes, if they're interested in getting support from at least one of the party. Because the Bloc's demands, we know, they're clear, they're expansive. The Conservatives, not quite interested in doing the same thing, even though there's a lot of conservative-leaning measures I'm expecting in this budget. The NDP, though, is keeping their cards close to their chest, and that gives them a lot of options come budget day.
Sabrina, how far do you think the Liberals are willing to go in this game of sort of political chicken? Because at points, there are some members opposite that, say, and even, Don Davies had said that they're kind of governing like they're a majority and daring others to try and bring them down.
Yeah, and I think that's been Mark Carney's approach since day one, because what Canadians ask for and what Canadians want is stability, right? Like you saw, I think it was like 10 months of dysfunction in Parliament over the last 18 months in total, and I think that Canadians are sick of that. And so I think that Mark Carney and the team is putting forward a budget that reflects, first of all, I think they've changed the budget cycle, they've changed the budget structure, they've made a lot of integral changes to actually reflect a budget process that better is going to meet the needs of Canadians, meet the fiscal moment. And I think that they're going to only play chicken with the Conservatives. The Conservatives are never going to vote for this budget. But it's interesting to see Pierre come back on this conversation with the budget. He lost almost 2 weeks on this RCMP snafu. And so I think that, it's interesting to see Pierre now try to maybe recover that and try to bring back the conversation to affordability. But at the end of the day, I don't think the Conservatives have a coherent message. So even though they're going to vote down the budget, I don't think there's much that they're going to bring forward to Canadians elsewise. The NDP really don't have the infrastructure or the wherewithal to handle an election. So likely what you're going to see is a couple of seats empty in the House, perhaps, to get to that majority vote. And then the Bloc, we already knew weren't going to vote for the budget. And so the Liberals have really discounted that and haven't been pursuing that angle. I think there's not really a chance that this budget doesn't get voted in, but I think it's in the Liberals' interest to continue demonstrating that the Conservatives aren't fit to govern if it does go to an election.
Larissa, what do you think about this pre-positioning and how it almost seems like the fight now between Carney and Poilievre is really around the sort of sacrificing and whether or not they should be doing more, preparing for it, or whether or not young people, because their message was both to young people, or whether or not, it's the time is up for that? Because it almost seems like Mark Carney has tried to sort of get in that sandbox, and you almost wonder whether or not he's going to regret going there.
I think he's going to regret going there. Young people like Pierre Poilievre. They've liked him for many years. They were watching his YouTube videos when he was talking about the fact that he sees the fact that they can't afford a house, and he sees the fact that they're living in their parents' basement. And he was very popular with that cohort. The problem is they didn't vote as much as their parents did. And their parents like Mark Carney, and their parents like the stability that Mark Carney perceived to offer. And Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre will continue to spar and will continue to take punches against each other, and none of that matters because the NDP can't afford an election. Full stop. And you had Don Davies on here, and he was laying out all the things that he'd like to see from the budget, and he's not going to commit, and this and that. And then he said one thing that basically complained about the fact that the Conservatives and the Bloc get to be more rigid in their view towards the budget. He literally can't afford to. They don't have a permanent leader. They only have 7 seats. They don't have the infrastructure across the country, and they don't have the money. The Conservatives and the Liberals and the Bloc, frankly, could all figure it out. They could all fund it. They could all whip together an election. It would be the demise of the NDP. The Liberals also shouldn't go to an election because it's too risky. They could lose more seats. The population doesn't want an election. We've had so many provincial elections. We've had, the federal election. We've had major cities have an election. Canadians are tired. They don't want it. And the risk of ticking off the population is too great. The budget's going to pass. People will, and it's funny, they don't even have to show up to vote. So they have to literally not log in to vote. But enough people will not log in to vote, and the budget will pass.
Carl, I'm going to give you the last word only because we've had 2 people on this panel basically say that the NDP can't afford an election and they're not going to go. So you got to respond to that.
What do they have to lose? To be honest, they have 7 seats. Well, they go down to 3. Who cares? Doesn't matter. They're not going to run a 40 million election. They're going to target seats and try to win status back. That's all they're going to do. But, if you want to think about that, who has the most to lose if you go in an election? I think the Liberals do, because they are the ones that have power right now. They could jeopardize that if they go into an election. So I'm not saying that the NDP will bring down the government. I'm saying that, we've been there before, where a prime minister in a minority situation governed as if he had a majority. That was Joe Clark. He counted round, and then he was turfed.
Okay, we're going to leave it on that note, and I'm going to remember all of those candies that Doug Ford said were Ontario made. I'm going to make sure I go get them. Sabrina Grover, Larissa Waller, and Carl Belanger. See, Larissa, brought it back. I brought it back.
I saw it.
Thank you all for being on the front bench. After a quick break, is tonight the night? Well, Larissa wants to know because the Blue Jays are one win away from winning the World Series. And they hit it out of the park with a Game 7 win against the Dodgers. We'll check in live from the stadium right after this.
I've heard that we're going to rename the team tonight to the Canada Blue Jays because this is truly the country's team, and these guys have had the nation on their backs, right up on their shoulders for the last couple of weeks. It's been so exciting, and you're right, like sport really brings a country together.
And that was Secretary of State for Sport Adam Van Koeverden speaking to CTV News earlier, just ahead of tonight's World Series Game 6 matchup. The Toronto Blue Jays are just one win away from their first World Series in 32 years. The country had been rallying around this team, as they are calling them Canada's team. Now, CTV's John Vinivelli-Rao is at the ballpark ahead of tonight's big game. He joins us live right now. And John, what is the atmosphere like? Are fans ready for a party, or are they sort of cautiously optimistic going into this one?
I would firmly put it in the party camp. These are the towels that they'll be waving tonight. The I want it all towels, right? And the fans here want it all tonight in Game 6. They're feeling pretty confident, although they are mindful that this Dodgers pitcher that they're up against, Yamamoto, is a pretty tough guy. Remember, he pitched that absolute gem in Game 2 and pretty much shut down the Blue Jays offense. So the fans, while confident the Jays can win, they also know they've got a backup plan, because if the Jays don't win tonight, they get a second kick at it tomorrow in Game 7 if necessary. But again, the fans really hope on this Halloween night that they will also be celebrating a World Series victory.
Yeah, definitely hoping for a treat rather than a trick, John. But how ready is the city for this? It's been 32 years. They haven't had a championship. And when you consider the atmosphere, Canada, U.S., and everything that this country needs, do you feel like there is this overwhelming sort of anticipation in the city?
Absolutely. And I mean, you're absolutely right about, given the state of U.S.-Canada relations this year, a lot of people are feeling the same way. Wouldn't it be just so sweet for this to be the year that the Canadian baseball team wins this championship on Canadian soil? The city is ready for it. The Toronto police have said that they've got lots of officers out tonight. They've actually called in reinforcements from some of the neighboring jurisdictions. So plenty of police tonight, just in case this is a big rowdy party, which is what everybody's anticipating, a party. But of course, again, if they lose tonight, everything gets pushed tomorrow to Game 7, and everybody hope they'll win it then.
Yeah, hopefully it is tonight. CTV's John Vinivelli-Rao reporting for us. Appreciate this, John. That is your Power Play Week in Politics. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I'm Mike Couture. Have yourselves a great weekend, a happy Halloween, and as the whole country is saying, go Jays go. Stay with us, though. Your top headlines are just ahead.